Here's a radical idea. What if people were just nice to each other? That's the subject of today's focus, the Ierendi natives known as the Makai. These people are obviously based on the Polynesian people of the real world, only with shaman, a complicated bureaucratic government masquerading as a monarchy, and resorts. They've long been criticized as boring because of their lack of apparent conflicts, which is a fair comparison considering most of the other nations of the known world have a thing for beating people up or cutthroat business practices. They might not be a violent people, but they are an interesting one. I'm Mr. Welch, and welcome to Mystara, and surf's up, dudes. The Makai were introduced in the Ierendi Gazetteer as the majority population of the island chain. They were a melting pot of various island peoples from real-world examples, but they did have the same general features. The typical Makai has black hair, bronze skin, and facial hair on men being rare. Some of them are lithe and muscular, others are built like a side of beef and have to walk through doors sideways. The name Makai in Hawaiian means either towards the sea or police, depending on whether you're using a baby book or Google Translate for the etymology. I'm guessing from a baby book because the internet didn't exist in 1987, and I seriously doubt book author Anne Gray McCready spoke Hawaiian. And if you're watching, let me know. The origins of at least some of the Makai, curiously enough, are on the mainland, when Ierendi was part of the Timuran Empire and was still attached to the continent. At least we think they were from the mainland. Their ancient history is all over the place across multiple books, and none of them sync up with each other very well. But at least the multiple origins explain why we seem to have the cultural aspects of various real-world nations. Timora sinks, the Ierendi Islands break away, and the Makai take over the islands from the lizardmen that were the original population. While they did fight with the reptilians for their land, the fight wasn't a tough one as the lizardmen were already dying off from a plague that had ravaged their population since the Nithian Empire. The general belief is that the people that are now the Makai are the descendants of multiple human groups that arrived in the chain, from the surviving Timorans that went along for the ride, as well as numerous tribes from the Thanagoeth archipelago that migrated from the south. These groups settled the different islands, traded with each other for centuries, and eventually intermarriage and cohabitation turned the different tribes into the people we have now. Their population was never great, and the islands provided more than enough for everyone, so there was little need for conflict. They did have warriors called the Toa, but they were more concerned about outside threats to the islands than fighting each other. And just so people stop asking if they got this name from Bionicle, in most Polynesian cultures the word for warrior is Toa. The word Toa existed long before the Danish invented their brightly colored blocks. Then the Makai lived peacefully for centuries until the arrival of the Thaiatians, who looked at the islands and thought this was a great place to settle all their convicts. They came across a tropical paradise and thought this is where they needed to ship all their malcontents. So in 571, Ierendi became the latest Thaiatian conquest and got to be roommates with the worst that Thaiatis could offer. There is a continuity issue where the Hen of the Shires either copied this idea after the invasion and moved their prisoners to the islands, or they settled on the islands before the Thaiatians and were the first to encounter the Makai. The Shires were under control of Thaiatis in 600 AC, which contradicts the Five Shires book, which wasn't written yet, and this is why it's important to have your timeline written before piecemealing out the books to different writers. Long story short, the ancient Makai lived on the mainland until Timora broke away, which wasn't mentioned in their own book, but instead in the Sea Peoples, and became the modern Makai when other tribes from the southern islands arrived on the newly formed chain and later assimilated into the culture. I was not expecting this video to turn into a continuity error hunt, yet here we are. So the Makai languished under the Thaiatian rule for an eternity, an entire 29 years. 29 years, that's it? Not even 3 decades? In a setting where everything lasts centuries, the small number of native islanders and some pirates and prisoners throw off the boot of their conquerors in less time than it takes the Cleveland Browns to reach the Super Bowl? Talk about overachievers. The Makai and their standard friendly approach to everything became pals with the convicts that Thaiatis moved in, and with the help of some plucky little pirates liberated their homelands. So you now had the Makai free again, but with some new neighbors. Fortunately, since the combined population of the former prisoners and the Makai still didn't fill up the entirety of the islands, there was room for everybody. The philosophy of the Makai is that if everyone just calms down and enjoys life, everything will be great. This isn't a universal belief, as they do have a small portion that still embraces the warrior traditions of their ancestors, and others take up the beliefs of the former mainlanders that populate half the nation. But in general, they are welcoming to visitors and focused on living as a community and view recreation as just as important as other aspects of life. They work hard during the day, but they will make time afterwards to surf, fish, or join in a dance or song. While their military strength on land is best comprised of some old-school tribal warriors and whatever privateers are currently on shore leave, their biggest strength is the power of friendship. That's not an exaggeration, only Darrican has more allies on paper, and those allies won't set their enemies on fire for them. The Makai have long been friends with the Marrow of Seaholm, and occasionally their more stuffy Triton cousins. They are the Oscar to Fire Island's Felix. And if you know that reference, you're old, by the way. Every seafarer knows Ierendi is where you get greeted by the canoes filled with smiling and waving villagers as they approach. The laid-back attitude of the Makai affects how they govern themselves. They tend to let the mainlanders, as they call them, deal with all the day-to-day operations. There are quite a few Makai in positions of power, and they aren't ruled over by the former prisoners, but they tend not to concern themselves with things like collecting taxes, foreign affairs, or policing the tourists. They concern themselves more with dealing with the constant threat of tropical storms, making sure everybody is fed because of a disaster, or organizing cultural events. Makai make up the more rural communities, even though a large portion still live in the few large cities.
It's nice to live on an island with no large cities.
The core principle of their philosophy is there's enough for everyone, so why fight over what we have? This is largely because the islands are underpopulated while quite fertile. If they're hungry, they grab fruit from a tree. There's little danger on the island except for certain well-known areas which are easily avoided. The volcanoes are off-limits for this reason. Fish teem off the shores and are easily caught. Livestock is allowed to roam in pastures, providing meat and clothing as necessary. Unless a storm hits the islands, they want for nothing. When you don't have to worry about basic necessities, it's time for fun and games. The Makai enjoy a good time probably more than anyone in the known world. When they have spare time, and it's a common situation, they come together to entertain each other. No other nation outside of maybe the Five Shires has more holidays than the Makai. Friendly competitions are an everyday sight. Surfing, canoeing, and wrestling are typical pastimes. The women gather to gossip and make clothes. The men will swap stories as they fish. The children race all over the villages unsupervised. Cooking is usually done communally, then everyone sits down for dinner at the village center. This sounds idyllic, and it often is when things are going well. But living on a tropical island, things don't always go well. The biggest threat to the Makai is the weather. Their navy and their friendly relations with their neighbors tend to keep the bad guys away. What can't be stopped are the tropical storms and hurricanes that threaten the region for half the year. They are well prepared for these storms, but they're still devastated by them at least once a year on average. When one approaches, the villagers flee to well-built stone structures built on higher ground to weather out the disasters. Thanks to their navy, they tend to have advanced warning and they take few chances in times like these. But the larger storms can wipe villages off the map. Their buildings and crops wash away, leaving them in dire circumstances once the waters have receded. The other Makai waste no time in helping the less fortunate rebuild, putting everything else on hold until the damage is dealt with. One group of Makai that don't share the carefree attitude of the people are the Toa, the ones holding onto the warrior cultures of their ancestors. They keep to tradition, practicing with their traditional weapons of spears and clubs, and can be heard from a distance singing their war songs, the haka. They believe that someone must protect their people, and that is their solemn duty. They fought back against the Thaiatians, though they were overwhelmed by superior forces. They were never numerous, even among their own people. They practiced their skills by serving as marines on Ierendi ships, waging war on the Kara, the ancestral foe of the Makai people. They are admired in their culture, partially because of their adherence to the old ways, and also because despite their focus on war, they still do it while singing. They rarely cause trouble on the islands. They only fight against those who threaten their people. Plus, the tourists pay a small fortune to watch them drill. The Makai don't worship a specific immortal. Instead, they practice the philosophy of the People's Temple. This is where they gather to share news, ask for help, pass on messages, and keep everyone informed of current events. This isn't a formal religion. The clergy have no official title. Clerics of the People's Temple are addressed by their name instead of a position. It's more like a town hall meeting rather than a religious gathering. Despite them not worshipping any immortals or spheres directly, someone's granting their cleric spells. People assume that some immortals have taken a liking to the message that the church promotes, be happy and help people, and as a reward bestow powers on the priests. No one knows who's doing this. None of the immortals will admit to it. This does make the clerics of the People's Temple believe their teachings are correct, and they're not complaining. The Makai know the islands like the back of their hand, at least the ones they call home. Of the 8 inhabitable islands in Ierendi, they are the majority on the titular island, Alcove, Elegy, Fletcher, and Royster. Utter Island is dominated by the albino people that claimed it, safaris for the tourists, while Aloysius is where the largest number of criminal descendants live. Except for Ierendi and Safari Islands, the Makai live far apart from the mainlanders. There's plenty of room for everyone. The average population of the small islands is less than 2,000. That puts the entire nation's population's density on par with Iceland, except a warmer, fertile, and more clothing-optional Iceland. The Makai, despite their laid-back nature, make great adventurers. The Toa want to fight, but only things that are a challenge to them. It's no fun spending years of your life learning how to stab people when there aren't any people to stab. The clerics are getting spells without serving an immortal. They want to spread the word. Despite not having much in the way of locks or traps, the islanders can be rather sneaky and they climb trees and mountains for fun. This makes them excellent rogues. There are Makai wizards, though their magic tends to be low level and possess quite a bit of anti-pest and weather magic. Next up on Welcome to Mystara are the proscribed races of the multiverse. Mystara isn't very welcoming to interplanar visitors, and they are far more hostile to some races than others, as it will be a cold day in Limbo before I let my daughter marry a Githyanki. Until then, remember, Ohana means family.